scroll down, you should have a second page. On these second pages, I put some headlines. Some of them have some subheadlines. And what you're going to do is kind of manipulate these headlines, design them however you want, to where they kind of play off of the words in them. And so I'll show you what I mean there. So your first one is when memory fades, and you're going to redesign this exactly as I'm doing it now. And this is our end game. Actually, I'm going to show you how to turn this into this, but we'll just start with this first example. One thing I want to point out to you before we start designing, so hopefully we know what serif and sans serif fonts are by now. This fades is obviously a serif font. We've got our little feet here. And then when memory up here is a sans serif font. So sans serif fonts play really well with serif fonts, like the mix looks good. I would recommend that when you put a separate text on top of another, that this one's all caps, just so all the letters come up to the top. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. So I'll move this guy down. And another tip I would give you is when you're manipulating text like this, like obviously we're going to do something different to the fades, put that in its own text box. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to Command copy the fades, delete it from there, and I'm going to shrink this to where it fits. There we go. And I'm going to Command V. I'm going to paste fades. And so now we have two separate text boxes that we're working with. For the fades, I want this to be all caps. So obviously it disappeared. This little plus sign means that there's not enough space for it to be, so I just need to extend it. And actually, you know what? I'm going to want this whole thing to be a lot bigger. So what I'm going to do is hold Command Shift and just stretch my fades, which is easier than selecting and pressing up, 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 right? It's faster, and InDesign is all about not wasting time. Okay, that looks good. So I have fades in Minion Pro, which is a serif font, and I also have when memory in Minion Pro because that's the default on this computer. I'm going to go ahead and change that to Century Gothic, which we should know is a sans serif font, so we won't have the little feet here. And I'm going to left align it. So I want everything to kind of start on that same purple line. In fact, I'll move my fades over, move this over. And this when memory, if you look over here, is actually a little too big. So let's drop that to maybe 45. Better. I'm going to bring it down. All right, let's see. Good. I need a line in there. So I'm going to click on my line tool. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to draw my line. I'm holding Shift so it doesn't move. And it's not going to touch the Y. I doubt you can see it. Let's zoom in a little bit. So let's make it a 1-point box. There we go. So you see how it's not touching the Y. It's kind of pointing to the Y, which I like. Let's zoom out. You can overprint preview it so you can see what it looks like so far. Pretty basic, but it looks like we've got the basic components. What we really need to do is all these special effects to the fades. So hopefully you put it together, but you can see that the fades is fading. So let me show you how to do that. All right, I'm going to grab my selection tool and I'm going to have this box selected. I am going to fit the box to the content. You can do that by pressing Option Command C and it'll fit to your content, or you can also go to Object, Fitting, Fit my frame to my content. All right, I'm going to right click, and if you come down to Effects, this is where you get to do all the fun stuff. I'm going to click Gradient Feather, and it's going to open this box for me. So you should have seen that it did it automatically, right? But I want this to be text. So I'm going to do the text, Gradient Feather, but the problem is I also have it for Object. Hopefully you're not playing with this problem. Under Object, you don't want anything to be selected. Under Text, you want Gradient Feather selected, and you can kind of manipulate how much of that fading happens. So the more I move to the right, the less the S goes away, or the more clear the S is, I guess. And if I move to the left, the more we're going to lose that S and even the E. So it's hard to even see it. So we'll kind of go, let's say here. So I want to be able to see that there's an S, but I still want that effect happening. So we've got the fade. And we also need this drop shadow. Do you see this shadow behind? We're going to add that too. So we're going to click on drop shadow, and you get some options here with your drop shadow. Whoopsies. Here we go. Drop shadow, so we get some options. Again, we want to be using this for text. Here we go. This is pretty much the big option here. You can control where that shadow moves. Ooh, we're in gradient feather, sorry. InDesign's a little confusing sometimes. On the drop shadow, we can control where that shadow moves. You see it moving around? We're going to kind of put it, let's see, a little bit to the left and up. I think that's how I like it. Is that what they have? Yep, that's what we did. Perfect. Go away. Okay. Whoopsies. All right. And then you can also click this box, the shadow honors other effects. What that means is we've faded this text, but the drop shadow for the S is just as clear as the drop shadow for the A. So if we click on this, it's going to do the same thing. Okay, so it's going to mimic. The shadow's going to fade as the text fades. So yes, we want the shadow to honor other effects. You can also change how clear you want that shadow to be. So if I want a really dark shadow, I can change it to 100. Or if I want less of a shadow, we can lower it. 75 is probably pretty solid, so we'll leave it there. Play around with this if you want. Your drop shadow doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but something pretty close would be good. All right, and then the last major thing is we should change it to green, right? So we're going to change fades. And we're going to come down to the fill. Make sure you're not on the stroke, you're on the fill. And we're going to change it to green. Let's go with this one. Perfect. It's actually a little lighter probably than this green. Yep, we'll make it a little darker. Not hard to do. Let's try that. That's better. Perfect. Okay, so the hard part's done. We have our fades, we have this part. We do need to put a color box underneath it and some reverse text. So that's pretty simple. Let's zoom in a little bit. We will draw our color box all the way across. And if you click the eyedropper tool, it should pull the color from the F, which is beautiful. And we're going to pull this text up. And if it's not showing up, that means it's behind the color box. So we need to Object, Arrange, Bring to the front. And we're going to fit our box that way. And make it white. Okay. And if we look over here, you should notice that this font is a sans serif. And this font over here that I'm using is a serif. So we obviously need to change the font. And when you're designing things like headlines, you want to stay consistent with your font choices for the most part. If you use more than 2 or 3 fonts, it's going to get pretty crazy. So I'm pretty sure this font is going to be Century Gothic, just like this top part. So we're going to go ahead and turn this to Century Gothic. Beautiful. And then we also want it to fit all the way across, right? So we talked about manipulating the text. Let's go ahead and start by making it bigger. Here we go. Oh, not quite, right? Too much. So now we're just going to play around until we get it to fit as best as we can. If we look over here, it ends on senior, so we're going to go ahead and do that too. And I'm going to move it down because I don't want, do you see this ascender? It's touching that box. I don't want it to actually touch the box. I want it to be contained in the box. So we'll do that. And we still have some space over here, so let's do some of those text manipulations we learned about today. I'm going to increase my tracking, which worked. We bumped that up to 20. And I'm going to increase the width of the letters. Oh, too much. Do you see how we lost memories? Let's see if we can't make the box a little bit bigger to fit. There we go. I'm just going to move it over so nothing's touching the white on the outside. Perfect. Okay. And that is how you create this headline. We're going to take it one step further. So I showed you this too. A couple of things that are pretty cool about this. It's kind of very magazine style, right? Because we have this yellow box behind it, and then we have our text down here, which is nice. But I really like this little triangle, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It's really simple. So first, let's go back in. And you should notice that this Win Memory has now changed to that green color as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. and I'm going to pull it from the box, because if I pulled it from the F, I'll show you what happens. It's going to change that whole box to look identical to fades, which is going to be crazy, right? We don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and move this so I can pull that color from my box and click. Now it has changed colors, which is nice. I can bump this back up. Perfect. All right, so now we need this yellow box behind there. So I'm going to draw my yellow box for my story. Let's see, and I'm on the fill again, not the stroke. And I'm going to pull a pale yellow. That should do. Actually, that's a little greener than I'd want. Let's make it a little more yellow. Good. We're going to send it to the back. Oh, it's still really green, isn't it? That's better. Okay. And then we also, let's see, we need to move everything over a little bit. So I'm going to select everything. I'm going to deselect this box by holding Shift and clicking. Now I have everything selected besides my yellow box. I'm going to move it over a little bit so my fades is in there. And now I'm going to play with this box. So this box where my subheadline is extends off the yellow box. So that's our first mission. We're going to move it. And now we're just going to extend it off that yellow box a little bit. Perfect. And now, if you zoom in, we're going to make that little triangle go right here. So first what you'll do is you're going to draw a rectangle, okay? And then we're going to fill it with the same color green. Perfect. If you'll notice, this bluish green is lighter than this one. So we need to make this a little bit lighter. Couple of options. You could, one, come over to the colors and select a lighter color. Ta-da. Or, a little simpler, you can lessen the fill of it. So this is the, I think, opacity of the actual green. If we go to 0, you can't see it at all. If we come to 50, you can kind of see it, and then 100% would be the full green. We're just going to drop it to, let's say, 60-ish. 60. Perfect. All right, so you should notice, obviously this is still a square, not helpful. If you come to your pen tool, if you click and hold, make sure you're on the delete anchor point tool, the little minus. Click on him, and you should be able to delete one of those points, which will then give you a triangle. I'm going to move my triangle in. We're going to zoom in a lot, and we're going to get this perfectly aligned. I know you guys probably can't see it, so I'll zoom in. Hopefully you can see this white space. We don't want that white space. Zoom out one more. All right, see this white space right here? Hopefully. We don't want that, so we need to be exact when we're lining these up. Zoom in as much as it'll let you. That's pretty dead on. Good, let's zoom out and see what we think. That's a pretty big bend. You could just shrink it a little bit. Perfect. Okay. I'm going to move this over a little bit. You don't want it touching the yellow, remember. Okay. Anything else? I know you can't really tell, but this line is actually gray and it's touching the outside. So we're going to zoom in on this line. We're going to let it touch the outside. Perfect. And then again, we're just going to drop that opacity. Let's drop it to 76 or 60, 66. We'll do that. Perfect. And then the last step should be really easy. You're just going to draw your text box. We're going to, let's make it Century. No, let's do a serif font. If you haven't looked at Baskerville yet, one of my favorites, Baskerville, and we're going to fill with placeholder text, bam, and then we're going to up the number of columns we are repping to 3. And there you go, perfectly designed magazine page. I know that's kind of tedious, so rewind or pause or go back however much you need.